Yeah. Cool. Ah, shucks. Be right back. Yeah. So, welcome to Philosophy Roulette number 220, where I read and review philosophy papers live on air for the broadcast world. Mostly just Twitch peoples, but that's cool. And also eventually on the YouTubes. So, let's see. Here we are on the front page of Phil Papers. Let's see what this is the basically the start of the 2021 spring semester. So we shall see what new things are out for this new year of philosophy. Journal articles. Canadian Journal of Philosophy. Probabilistic antecedents and conditional attitudes. Let's see how long this is. Archintness. Also, permissivism and truth connection. These are got some. Just take a look, and we'll also take a look at Philosophia. Let's see, Canadian Journal of Philosophy. Let's see what's forthcoming if they have page numbers on them. Predicting recidivism. Ooh, a Quine paper. Interesting. So we've got that. Got a few right here that are not too long. Thinking about value in science, ethical versus political approaches. Oh yeah, you can see it here, but I now have a Discord server, so gonna be more of a internet social person. So you type in socials, and you can get at least a Discord link. Maybe one of these days I'll start using Twitter again or whatever, and or maybe I'll make a Twitter for the philosophy channel, or maybe the Minesweeper stuff. So there'll be stream announcements and other announcements there if you are a Twitter user. But okay, so we got some stuff here. I also had this paper from Journal of Philosophy, The Rejection of Consequentializing, which was available. So we got that one. So if you want to join the Discord server, discuss what things to read, make suggestions. I take suggestions if anyone wants to email me. I had a very nice email from one of the professors. They saw my review, sent a few more papers along. That was very cool of them. I appreciate that. Yeah. So yeah, you are free to suggest papers, but we're just taking a look what's around. 1 to 18, oh man, but I kind of like this topic. I don't really want to read 18 pages because that gets about an hour 20 minutes. But let's see if it's here. Let's see how technical it is too. The problem is see if it's available. Okay, if it's not available, it does not matter in that case. But yeah, this could have been. You never know, maybe it's open access. Sometimes that happens. I should read more in the Canadian Journal of Philosophy. Seems like a good journal. I'm always sort of okay. But yeah, nope. So, no thank you. I mean, and who's in favor of classical Quine? I am not in favor of classical Quinean ontology. I think even Quine said it shouldn't be Quinean. It should be either Quinean or Quininian ontology if you can actually pronounce the. Oh, it's on academia. We can give it a quick look over and see what it looks like. 21 pages, single spaced. Nah, that's so they lie to us about the page numbers. I don't like that. Let's see what's forthcoming in our contentness. A new look at levels of organization in biology. People do this a lot for some reason. They always love talking about levels of organization in biology. It's I have something to say. Like I have philosophical positions on this topic. I I'm basically against levels of organization. I think you have to be much more relative. It's like saying like size in physics. Like, well, size in physics is not. I mean, it's relative to us size, but physics does not care about size. It's actually a metaphysical proposition in physics that physics works at all different sizes. So things that happen at the very small stage have to also be affected at things very big at the very like astronomical level too. So this is people have written articles on like size relativity in physics, and so it's a touchy subject actually. Like what is a level in any of these physical sciences? Okay, and so this is old stuff. I don't know because I'm pretty sure I read all of this. Let's see. Is there like new things here? I don't know. Let's definitely read that Chalmers paper though. Free will and desire. That could be sounds like fun. Approaching truth in conceptual spaces. 15 pages. Knowledge representation is a central issue in a number of areas, but few attempts are made to bridge the gap. Made to bridge different approaches across different fields. Blah blah. No, I don't like those. It's very hard to write papers like that. I mean, I'm sure it's good, but I'm just gonna make myself angry, and that doesn't make me happy. This is 16 pages, or 17, I guess. Whatever. Grounding pluralism. I've read a lot of papers on grounding now. Let's see. Free will and desire. Let's take a look at this. This is 13 pages. Did I read this? I make a case for the thesis that no one can refrain from trying to attain the object of his or her currently strongest desire. My currently strongest desire is to find a paper that is available to read. And I'm very strongly looking like I'm going to get that one like over here that I already had. Let's go take a look. Is this really... No, this is 24 papers. Oh, 24 pages, but double spaced. So maybe I'll be reading that one. Permissivism and the Truth Connection. How long are we? Oh, this is a doc file? Let's take a look real quick. Sorry, you can't see this. What are we talking about? Sometimes more than one doxastic attitude that's perfectly rationalized by the evidence. So we got multiple things you could believe about. There's underdetermination of beliefs. You can have many beliefs given your current belief state. Let's take a quick look at it. Oh, wrong button. Stinking fish, what is your suggestion? Alright, so this one I just downloaded looks like it's double spaced at 30 pages. That's 15. So this is a possibility. Let's see what Stinking Fish just sent me. Computing Machinery and Intelligence. Classic paper by Turing. Let's see how long it is. We'll see how long. Let's see. Because these are sometimes... 28 pages. Yeah, see, I'm not reading a 28-page paper generally. And let's just see. I mean, because once I get to 15 is like an hour. And so this would be a 2-hour pages. And I'll tell you, my mental capacity after like a little over an hour just starts to drop off. I just can't maintain the same level of commentary. I'm sure, like, I wouldn't be surprised. It looks like it's you can see on the screen, it's not like tons of formulas. So it looks very reasonable to actually read, but it's simple math on my part. If I get, my brain starts to like, I'm just not as maintaining a level of sophistication in my comments. It doesn't work. I start getting stupider because start getting like mentally exhausted. So I just can't handle 30-page papers in one sitting. And I used to, like a long time ago, like when I was just starting out, I didn't know. I split stuff off over two, like I'd have like for part 1, part 2, and I could go back to that. I haven't thought about that, but it's hard enough as is to get people, like, when you're in a paper, you have to, like, explain everything that's going on. So I have to be like, well, you have to go watch the previous episode, like, to understand what's going on. That seems like a little unfair to my viewers. I like to be able to, like, recap what's going on, but it's if we're talking like an hour of discussion just to get to where I am, that makes it even harder. And so if you have like I'd be happy to read that, but like, you know what? I have to think about how to do a long paper. Because I've done like so many short papers. I'd like to do long papers again, but like it's just scary. Like being able to talk like intelligently for more than like 5 minutes is hard enough. But like when you're trying to like read and talk and do it for like an hour and a half, I get exhausted and I just can't seem to I can't keep up the level of commentary I want to, you know? So good suggestion, but like I just have to, like, if it's like a 20-page suggestion, maybe I'll do that, because like I'll go an hour and a half, but I really start getting exhausted between like keeping the stream going and focusing on the paper. So I mean, I'd love to read stuff like that, but it's tough. All right, you know what? I'm getting sick of looking for things. If you got another suggestion, please let me know. But you have to kind of. I do have my limits. Permissivist. Oh, this is here. Let's take a look. Oh, this was the Nah, I'll just go read this other one I had. This is the Rejection of Consequentializing. I don't know what this is either, though. Let's go see if it's got too many formulas. Nah, this looks okay. So we'll do this. You can see how long things take to get published. This is a download button. Save file. So yeah, you know, I would like to maybe what I'll do is if you want me to read some more philosophy of computers and technology, there are journals on that, and I can go look on those. So if like, that's not a bad idea actually. I could go look on the journals of that specialize in that sort of stuff. So let me know if that's like something you'd be interested in. Was it philosophy of computation, philosophy and computer? I forget what they're called. Yeah, trying to get you. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Like, it's a good idea. That's why people are gonna read that paper, because it is a classic paper from Turing. And it's a good suggestion. That's why people are gonna read it. It's just for stream, it's a little hard. Yeah, let me know if you guys have reading groups out there. Like, I'll read along with you. Like, if you guys want to use me as like a discussion point, I'm okay with that. Like, that crazy idiot on Twitch said this about this paper. It's like, all right. But anyway, yeah, I appreciate the suggestion, but I'm gonna read this one because, well, it was available. Yeah, and if any of you guys are in the Northeast at the moment of the United States, good luck. I can see it's like, I think they said 17 inches of snow. That is I don't know, like it's getting towards not quite half a meter of snow. Yeah, out there right now, so it's a little scary outside. So I was like, best thing for it, let's go stream some philosophy and do that. All right, so we've got The Rejection of Consequentializing by Daniel Muñoz. I apologize how I say your name and everyone else's name and everything else in not very basic English. And anyone out there watching, feel free to make comments as I'm going. I will try to read your comments and answer any questions. But it's my first time reading it too. Introduction. Act consequentialists think that acts are right when they have good outcomes, so that it's never wrong to make things go best. Alright, so I have no idea what go best is. Things go best. Is that like Melania be best? Never wrong to make things go best. So, I mean, immediately, of course, we have to know what good outcomes are, and rightness is, but I mean, okay, this is the classic stuff. The classic complaint, there seems to be counterexamples. 5 lives are better than 1, for instance, and you may not kill me even if my organs will be used to save 5 sick people. Best outcomes, wrong act. What does that mean for consequentialism? Yeah. So even if you think all these things are the fine, it still looks like there's counterexamples, which is the classic problem. Many ethicists, though they accept that killing is wrong, still feel compelled to remain consequentialists. So they say that killing really does make things worse because of some bad act, something bad about the act itself. 5 deaths are worse outcome than 1, but not worse than 1 death plus a killing. Of course, we don't normally think of an act as part of its own outcome. Our normal concept is that of a narrow outcome. The sum of one's acts downstream's effects is what happens minus the fact that the agent made it happen. That's interesting. I actually hadn't thought about calling it like a downstream effect from the act. I'm sure this is pretty normal stuff, but I'm not an ethicist, so I don't think about it. But there is also the kosher notion of a broad outcome, which includes the act itself, and so consequentialists may insist that killing 1 to save 5 is wrong because its broad outcome is suboptimal. See, I guess I had always thought about this broad outcome here because, you have to take into account what you're doing in some sense. That's also part of like the world. So why wouldn't that also be included in the existence of like total happiness in the world has to include whatever it is. And so I, just sort of maybe the very simple idea was your effect on society of the act. So it's like if you like destroy the government but everyone's happy for a while, that seems good, but like destroying the government may eventually, be some sort of other bad, bring about some other bad. And so it's like the idea that there's downstream effects, like you have to take into effect the long-term downstream effects of everything that you're doing, not just that the act can somehow be separated from it, like as if it was like in a vacuum. Why would the act be in a vacuum? So it's kind of how I always thought about it. Okay, this reply, known as consequentializing, is now itself a classic, but there is something funny about it. Just ask, how could it be worse by consequentialist lights to kill and save 5? The killing's narrow outcome is the best available, less death. And given consequentialism, we can't say that, see again, this is what I was saying, is there less death or is there like societal impacts on allowing certain murders? And given consequentialism, we can't say that the act is worse because it's wrong, that gets the explanation backwards, or because it violates a non-consequentialist right to life. There isn't any. So what could be bad about an act narrowly aimed at the very best? The consequentializer's answer must be that the act is but bad fundamentally. I argue that if this were the case, it would undercut their own reasons for being consequentialists. Yeah, I think that sounds completely right, because if there's something fundamental other than the outcome, then you're not a consequentialist anymore. I mean, what would it even mean that an act is bad fundamentally in consequentialism? For it to be fundamentally bad is for it to have a less good outcome. That's the definition of consequentialism. So, okay, I mean, this is an interesting setup, because it looks like this is almost too easy for the argument to go through here. Like, because this is by definition. If there's some sort of other thing besides the consequences. Yeah. But I'm sure that, I mean, it's fine also if, like, the author can set up, and so this is, like, the structure of the argument here. They're setting up their argument. It's to say, look, you've got this narrow and broad conception, but if you use any sort of narrowness, the narrowness constraints are going to be anti-consequentialist. So, that seems like where we're going here. And so this is maybe an anti-narrow argumentation is what's going on. You have to always go broad. Okay, and so yeah, that looks like what's going to happen, because now they're setting up why this is something special. This is a new objection. I am not just wheeling out the intuition that one killing doesn't seem as bad as 4 deaths, nor am I rehashing Nozick's 74 point that if killings are only wrong because they are bad, then we ought to minimize murders, even when that means committing one ourselves, which is intuitively wrong. I'm not here to insist on my intuitions. I want to bring out a tension in the consequentializer's overall view. What compels the consequentializer is the idea that it can't be wrong to produce the best outcome. But what makes this idea compelling, I argue, is a conception of action, the view that to act just is to produce an outcome. Consequentialism is only compelling if we are already inclined to see action as production. Now, some philosophers have directly attacked the compelling idea and this view of action. I will not. I grant that action might well be production, and that consequentialism could be genuinely compelling. But for the consequentializer, who draws brute distinctions between acts with the same effects, it makes no sense to insist that our outcomes are the only point of action. The consequentializer can't be compelled toward consequentialism. Okay, so that is kind of interesting how they're going to do this. Yeah, and let me know if this is confusing to you, because, I mean, I haven't really used this sort of consequentializer idea before, so I'm not 100% certain on it yet. Alright, so after some background, I argue for two premises: that consequentialism is only compelling given the view that action is production, and that consequentializing undercuts the view of action. So I think this is the narrow is what it's going to be. The consequentializing is going to be the narrow view of things. So, cool. Consequentialism. Let's start by getting clear on the target. So, let me just say, this is good. Like, as far as setting something up, because I haven't heard, like, I'm not an ethicist, so I have read less in this area. I know less about it. I just have, like, whatever my wacky intuitions happen to be, which never seem to be the same as anyone else's. So, this is, like, at least this paper is good for someone like me, because I don't know what the heck is going on, really. So, they're setting it up nicely. Like, when I write papers, I should do this. I don't do this. I just be like, look, I'm only writing for people who have some clue what's going on to begin with. And everyone hates that. All the journals hate that, so don't be like me. Be like this guy. Consequentialism. And if you're not a guy, I apologize too. The author. Let's start by getting clear on the target. Who are consequentialists? I have in mind a thin definition. Yeah, see, this is what's going on. We're going to split the world down into very thinness. A consequentialist is anyone who believes that an act's deontic properties, rightness, wrongness, etc., are explained exclusively by the evaluative properties of its outcomes, goodness, desirability, etc. The right is grounded in the good. Reasons for action arise from results. So this is the classic sort of line here. It's that you're looking at the results, the consequences. At the core of the consequentialism is a so-called compelling idea that it is never wrong to make things go best. Whose compelling idea is this? Like, really? You keep using this. Okay, so it's Hurley, maybe? So it's like recent Hurley paper uses the compelling idea? Because I mean, like I said, I don't know this stuff, but I don't know why that would be... This is the compelling idea. That it is never wrong to make things go best. But I mean... I don't know why that's like the way to say it. At the periphery, consequentialists disagree about which things are good, just pleasure or something more. They may also disagree whether maximizing the good is always required, whether rightness is sensitive to the agent's imperfect knowledge. I wonder if Chappelle is still... he was like blogging for a while, like public philosophy stuff. I wonder if he's still on it. Whether goodness is relative to an agent at a time, and whether the theoretical role played by goodness should be played by a close relative, like the reasons to prefer one's outcome. Okay, so, like, maybe the target's a little off, but, like, it's still, like, in the neighborhood. So, like, reasons to prefer one outcome is what goodness is. Whatever you think about these issues, you can't be a consequentialist if you see rightness as fundamental or as grounded in something other than lovely outcomes, responding to rights, expressing respect, etc. Yeah. Yeah, and anyone out there, if there's anything confusing, I will try to explain. Okay. The author will abstract away from these and other insider debates when using the label consequentialist. But let me emphasize that I use this label just for convenience. My main point is that anyone who grounds the right in the good should resist the idea that it's bad to kill the few to save the many. Why? Why should you? Maybe that is exactly... Just because you have that intuition, I don't know if other consequentialists will. Maybe some people are perfectly happy killing a few people to save everyone else. Nothing turns on whether we use consequentialist broadly as a name for all these authors or narrowly to name a specific subset. Yeah, see, here's the real problem right here, though, is that this is an intuition, though. My point is that anyone who grounds the right in the good should resist the idea that it's bad to kill the few to save the many. Why? Like, really? Why? Maybe someone's gonna, maybe someone's willing to bite the bullet on this. Like, just hardcore consequentialism, like, yeah, we're gonna kill a few of these people, and everyone else is way better for it. Now, biting the bullet there might be the solution if you're a consequentialist. I don't know. But, like, the idea that you're going to impose this sort of thing on all of the consequentialists in, like, sort of an abstraction, that is actually maybe not a fair abstraction, because there are going to be people who bite the bullet here. So, like, maybe they're going to justify, the author is going to justify this, but I'm not sure that, like, this sort of, this is like the hill to die on. Anyway, continuing. In the beginning, consequentialists agreed that acts could only have value extrinsically as a means to producing the really intrinsic goods. Some thought the sole good was pleasure, others believed that in a plurality of goods, including beauty and friendship, but no one thought of acts as good in themselves. Yeah, I mean, like, even if you're doing something pleasurable, it's usually for the pleasure, not for the act that brings the pleasure. So it's like eating chocolate. It's not the eating of the chocolate that you like, it's the chocolate, that the pleasure the chocolate brings, not the crunching on the, I just had one of these, like, semi-healthy, probably not, like, almonds and chocolate bars before the stream started. I do kind of like the crunch, but really it's like, that it's not the eating in itself is pleasurable, although actually, that's kind of funny. Maybe there is a way to square that, but, like, there's pleasure in that. A. DeMarshall. Yeah. You lucky? Dude, it's more like... Alright, hold on one sec. It's more scary than lucky at the moment. Let me just show you. Yeah, it's like half a meter of snow for all my non-American people. I think we're projected like 17, 18 inches of snow at the moment. So it's not safe to be outside, really. It's just not safe. I mean, if you like sledding, it's great, but, like, it's yeah, it's basically stay home today. No one's going anywhere. I mean, I like the snow. I mean, I almost broke my leg once. Actually, I did break my leg once. Thanks to Marshall. Yeah, I'm warm and happy in here. But, like, I did basically break my leg once sledding on way too big of a hill. But so I mean, I like the snow, but I haven't gone skiing in forever. But yeah, it's today is not the day to be outside. Really, you could like it's enough snow to break branches on trees. They could come down. It's just nasty out there. Okay, continuing. In the big, yeah, some things were good soul pleasure, others believe in plurality of goods, including beauty and friendship, but no one thought of acts as good in themselves. This would change in the 20th century as consequentialists partook from the tree of counterexamples. Oh, very cute, the tree of counterexamples. Some acts smacked of wrongness despite their wholesome effects, framing the innocent to stop a riot, from breaking a promise for expedience, etc. Here's a modern case. Footbridge. A runaway trolley is headed toward 5 innocent workers. You are on a footbridge over the tracks beside a large man. Push him to his death, and his body will halt the trolley, saving the lives of the 5. There's no other way to save them. Yeah, this is the... I mean, I apologize for saying it, but this is what is called the fat man solution to the trolley problem. So, like, you just push a fat guy in front of the trolley, and in doing so, save any number of other people. The man on the bridge does not consent to being pushed. Yeah, it's a cutesy phrase. This author does have some, I think they have put a little bit more effort into their writing than quite a few other writers of philosophy. So that is appreciated when you're reading it. I mean, you don't want to overdo it, but like just a little bit of it is really appreciated unless you're actually quite good. And then, of course, it's much appreciated. But philosophy is hard enough. Getting your writing right as well as doing it is, I've noticed, a bridge too far for many authors, although I appreciate this one. The man on the bridge does not consent to being pushed, and his life promises to be just as good as the life of any of the workers would enjoy if saved. Common sense tells us it would be for the best if the large man happened to fall in front of the trolley, as if blown by the wind, and yet it is intuitively wrong for you to shove him there. Old school consequentialists want to resist this intuition. I won't object. My target is the new school who try to absorb the intuition of wrongness by consequentializing common sense. To consequentialize a moral view is to cook up a consequentialist counterpart that preserves the original claims about which acts are right and which are wrong by changing what the view considers good and bad. Okay, so I guess the old school consequentialists want to resist, is that maybe they're just going to bite the bullet, is what the author is saying, because I don't know this. So if it's intuitively wrong for you to shove them there, they just say, nah, it's the right thing is for you to shove them. Yeah. Alright, how does this work? According to Dreyer's recipe, the consequentializer says that it is intrinsically bad that the act was performed, in this case the act of killing 1 to save 5. Thanks to the badness of the act itself, killing is wrong after all. This recipe, to its credit, has a rationale. To account for the wrongness of killing, the consequentialer needs to locate something in the outcome that is unexpectedly bad. But what? Not the narrow outcome. The act's narrow outcome, as a reminder, consists of its downstream effects. But the effect of pushing the man off the footbridge is that he falls and only 1 dies. The effect of refraining is that the man doesn't fall and 5 die. Clearly, less death is better. So there is only one place left to look within the broad outcomes, and that is the act itself, or in the fact that it was done. This distinction doesn't matter for us, yeah. So the consequentializer has a recipe, and it seems to handle footbridge fine by putting badness in the act itself. Act of killing. Indeed, Mark Schroeder thinks that the consequentializers can easily accommodate cases like footbridge. The recipe might not lead to a plausible view about how bad murders and deaths are, but it nonetheless shows that consequentialism as such is not directly threatened by such cases. The real trouble only starts, he thinks, when we bring in more elaborate examples, such as villainous footbridge. You were on the footbridge as before, but this time the trolley was started up by a villain. Kill the large man, and you will reduce the number of murders on the tracks from 5 to 1. Here killing seems wrong, but there is no easy way to accommodate this judgment within consequentialism, except by saying that killing is bad from the point of view of the agent. One must reduce one's own murders, and even that would not help with redemption footbridge. Same as villainous footbridge, but the villain was you. Kill the large man and you will reduce the number of murders you end up committing from 5 to 1. Okay, so you wanted to kill lots of people, but then you, I guess, be like, well, I could kill less people if I kill this one guy. So I guess that'd be kind of fun. Like, I'm going to kill 5 people, but then it was like, you, regret it? And you'd be like, I could just kill this one guy? To treat this case, we would have to make the badness of killing relative to the time as well as the agent. And so Schroeder thinks that the heart of the debate is here in the realm of relativity. The question is, should we believe in values relativized to times and moments? I'd just say, I'm not quite sure about this one. I mean, it feels like if you're a villain and you decide only to kill one person instead of 5, it sounds like that's progress. You've had regret. You feel remorse for your evilness. And so I'm not so sure about redemption footbridge. I mean, obviously redemption goes from the idea that you're feeling less bad. You're feeling bad and you want to undo it. But actually, I mean, if from your perspective all of the lives are the same, I don't see why you wouldn't kill 1 just to save the 5. Why is that so different? Granted, you'd have to be a psychotic murderer. So I don't actually have any intuitions of psychotic murderers. I don't know. But, I mean, this one means nothing to me because I don't know what it is to be a murderer. And I'd just be happy that the crazy person only killed 1 person as opposed to 5. Assuming I don't have any stock in who those people are or whatever. But yeah. So I'm not sure about that one. This villainous one though is this is more like what is it? The like the horror movies, like the Saw movies or something, where you have to do something really bad to have like the real good outcomes. And so this one's kind of much more interesting, the villainous, that you've got like some sort of like psycho killer that puts you into a bad position, and then what do you do? Because you're screwed no matter what you do, but maybe you can sort of like square at something because it wasn't up to you, and then in that case, like the whole setup isn't your fault. So I think this one's kind of interesting. I care less about this redemption one though, but I mean the point the author is making is still good here. Okay. So the question is, the point the author is making, do you relativize the times and moments? So like you are stuck in a bad situation. So that moment where you're stuck in a terrible situation, where you've got yourself caught in some sort of like crazy scheme of some psycho killer, like do you get a pass on normal reality or morality because you're stuck in a weird moment? And then if you're relativizing everything to that, why do you only get to relativize then? And then all of a sudden it seems like the whole of the ethics collapses because everything's going to be relativized to times and there is no general ethical scheme anymore. Okay, so this is a good question, but I think the consequentialist is directly threatened well before relativity enters the picture. There's something unstable about a consequentialism on which it's bad to cause good results, as does the killer in Footbridge. The core problem here isn't about whether killing is bad in a relative or neutral way. For consequentialists, the act should not be bad at all. So this author is saying only the narrow thing matters, only the consequence, even though the act is in some sense also a consequence. It also exists in the world. So you doing something isn't a cause, but it also exists. So I'm not 100% certain on this, but they're saying the act should not be bad at all. Okay. Why not consequentialize? I hope you are feeling puzzled. Well, I'm not entirely sure why I'm puzzled here. I hate intuition pumps. I'm sorry. Why am I puzzled? I'm always puzzled. Like, that's not special. If anyone else is puzzled, let me know too. I mean, yeah. We all learn in Ethics 101 that consequentialists who ground the right and the good are supposed to start with a list of goods and bads. I don't remember learning that, but okay. Sometimes the list of bads is as short as simply pain, but of course the list might be longer, featuring a variety of things: vice and error, injustice and inequality. Yeah, DeMarshall. What's wrong with adding one more thing to the list? Why can't the consequentializer just say that killing is another fundamental bad? One answer mentioned earlier is that killing 1 to say 5 isn't intuitively so awful, at least not by consequentialist lights. Yeah, this is the biting the bullet. I think there's something to this point. It is worth reminding ourselves that the consequentializer is cramming badness into an act with an impeachable narrow outcome for fewer deaths. This can't be justified by a prior concern for death reduction. On the contrary, the act that produces less death has more badness. Letting the 5 die is intrinsically better than killing 1. Old school consequentialists will scratch at their heads. Yeah, so they're just gonna be like, no, that 4 is less than 5. Therefore, 4 is less than 5. Done. Simple. What kind of consequentialist oh, sorry, I didn't see that earlier. What kind of consequentialist, utilitarian or Nietzschean perspectivism? I think this author said very early on they're using this as a very, very abstract version of consequentialism. They're basically, I think, more utilitarian, but like it's supposed to cover basically any of them. The argument here is that if you start allowing for if you start to pick out, and this is what they're starting to do right here, if you start to pick out things that you want to make like special, like murder or something, that any sort of narrow like choice in that area is going to lead to problems for the consequentialist. And that's like what the consequentializer is doing. They're saying, look, you have to look at the consequences of this thing as like a special thing. The act of killing someone is somehow bad in itself. And that's what the consequentializer talk is about. So yeah, so I think they're trying to be as abstract as possible. The question is they're doing it at a metaphysical level of to talk about the consequences, and then can you separate out certain things, like maybe Nietzsche would say that like the way to go about it matters, or like so you get beyond, well, don't want to get into discussion of Nietzsche now, but like it is supposed to cover everything, and how you go about it matters, they're saying. And so it's like how you go about the consequentialism is what is at stake here. All right, I'll try to answer it better if you have any more questions. Okay, this isn't new to the consequentializers. They agree that wrongful killings can have good effects, and they aren't trying to derive the badness of killing from anything else. Their point is that killing is bad fundamentally. This is not meant to be instantly obvious, but only to recapture, from a consequentialist point of view, our sense that it's wrong to kill the one. Is my question to make any sense? Well, of course there's differences between utilitarians, and if you want to say like Nietzsche was a utilitarian of some sort and other utilitarians, I mean, that's why I didn't want to get into Nietzsche, because if you're trying to separate out all the different utilitarians, we could be here all day just talking about different utilitarian theories. So, but the author here also had to make a sort of the same claim, where they're saying, look, I'm not attacking any one utilitarian theory. So, of course, your question did make sense. It's just, in some sense, to make any headway in this area, what the author is doing is talking about it at the metaphysical level, so that they didn't have to specify any one utilitarian position. Okay, so why not consequentialize? My answer is that the consequentializer is destabling their own view, since there is a tension between the initial motivation, the compelling idea, and the claim that killing is fundamentally bad. The consequentializer's view has three parts: a theory of what makes things good, a theory of what makes acts right, and an account of what actions are. They are compelled by the idea that it's never wrong to produce the goods. But this idea is only compelling given action as production, the view that to act just is to produce an outcome, and this view flies out the window once we open the door to a distinction between killing and letting die. This argument has two premises: compelled by production. Consequentialism is only compelling given action as production, undercut by consequentializing. If killing is worse than letting die, then action as production is false. The conclusion is that if the consequentializer is right about killing, consequentialism isn't really compelling. I'll now defend the premises in turn. Yeah, so this would be a counterexample saying killing and letting die are somehow, if they're not equivalent because they have the same outcome of just one more dead person, then you can't you're not a consequentialist anymore, because they have the same outcome, even though we're making a distinction here. Why consequentialism compels action? Why consequentialism compels action as production? Wow, I'm not getting through this very quick at all. I'm only on page 8 of 24. Yeesh. Ever since its inception, writes Tamara Shapiro, consequentialism... Yeah, 43 minutes is the issue with long papers. Consequentialism has been reinforced, if not entailed, by a particular picture of action as production. On this picture, the point of action is to make things happen, to change or preserve states of the world. Yeah, action is production is a view about what actions are. For any act A, there is a state S. Yeah, we are all kind of getting letting the poor die, but didn't kill him. Kind of. Yeah, exactly. This is a huge issue in society. It's like people think it's okay. It's like they tend to blame the poor for some societal issue, as if someone who had no money, it was their fault for being born that way. It's like being born poor is not a crime. There's a state S such that doing A just is to aim at producing S. Acts cannot differ unless they aim at producing different outcomes. What is it to produce an outcome? In the ordinary sense, producing means causing. I produce the deaths of the big man if I push him off the bridge, but I don't produce 5 deaths on the tracks when I refuse to push, nor does my refusal produce the remainder of the big man's life. Yeah. Oh, so that's interesting. If the big man was going to die of a heart attack, like a minute after the trolley passes anyway, and you didn't like, should that guy then be sacrificed because that 1 minute of his life doesn't really mean anything to the consequentialist? So I haven't heard anything like that, but I'm sure someone's discussed it. But consequentializers construe production more broadly. An act produces whatever happens when the act is done, no matter whether the act was a direct cause, a constitutive ground, or a failure of prevention. In this broad sense, acts even produce themselves. Portmore explains this very nicely. It is through our action that we affect the way the world goes. Moreover, whenever we act intentionally, we act with the aim of making the world go a certain way. The aim needn't be anything having to do with the causal consequences of the act. The aim could be nothing more than to bring it about that one performs the act. For instance, one could intend to run merely for the sake of bringing it about that one runs. The fact remains, though, for every intentional action, there is some end at which the agent aims. Yeah, I mean, it's just plain old intentionality, saying, I mean, you intend to do something, that's it. You don't need to do anything else. You don't needn't be the causal consequences, but we always are intending, when we do stuff, we tend to intend to do it. To act is to aim at an end, but the end can include the act itself. Yeah, so you can just intend to do something because you intend to do it. That's like basically it. You don't have to agree to it, but like it's like, look, we intend to do stuff, and that could just be the end of it. That's action as production. Now, why is it so crucial for the consequentializer? One simple reason is that it directly supports consequentialism. The picture of action nudges us toward the moral theory. Thus, Mill slides from action to ethics. All action is for the sake of some end, and rules of action, it seems natural to suppose, must take their whole character and color from the end to which they are subservient. Yeah. If acts aim at ends, we naturally infer to an end-based morality, and here is Portmore. Since our actions are the means by which we affect the way the world goes, and since our intentional acts necessarily aim at making the world go a certain way, it is only natural to suppose that our reasons for action are a function of our reasons for preferring some of those possible worlds to others, such that what agent has most reason to do is to bring about the possible world which all of those that she can actualize through her actions is the one she has most reason to want to be actual. That was a long sentence. This is just like Mill, right down to the phrase natural to suppose. We even find the same current running through the work of non-consequentialists such as Judith Jarvis Thompson. Given that for a person to act is just for the world to go in a way that it would otherwise would not go, surely the question whether he ought to act had better turn on a comparison between how it will go if he acts and how it will go if he does something else. To repeat, there seems to be nothing else for it to turn on. I agree. If action isn't production, then consequentialism loses an easy source of luster. Yeah. I mean, it would take out the, sort of the free will in ethics, which you kind of need to give personal responsibility quite often. And so it's like, if your intentions don't matter, like it's not your will, it's not your intention anyway, then what's the real, this is a different argument, but it's like, what's really going on there if you're going to say like there's moral, like merit to certain actions, if it's not really you doing the intending anyway. But, most people see this sort of like you have intend to make a state of the world happen, and then like, sure, like you intend to do it, you do it, and like it outcomes, and then you say, well, that was good or bad. But if you didn't intend to do it, then what's the point? Okay. But as Thompson hints, there's a deeper rationale for action as production is part of what makes consequentialism feel inescapable, nothing else, but part of what makes it so compelling. If action is all about outcomes, it seems that nothing besides a bad outcome could make an action wrong. And this leads us to the compelling idea, namely that an act can't be wrong if its outcome is optimal. This idea is what steals the consequentializer's will as they persevere through hard cases like Footbridge. No wonder. A natural reaction on first hearing the compelling idea is to ask how on earth it could be false. Well, sure. I mean, like, I don't know how many of you were here from the get-go, but I was like, the first thing I highlighted is what the heck is optimal. Who knows actually what is the optimal thing? So if we go back, we're page 9 at the moment, it's like, boom, right outcomes go best. Who knows what that is? Not me. So, but like that's really. But I mean, it's like, of course, if it's optimal, like, page 9. Yeah, here we go. But like, yeah. So on hearing it, it's like, well, you have to make it go best. It's like, sure, but we don't actually know what this best is. Okay. Now, I won't claim that the compelling idea is false, as deontologists think, or that it's dangerously ambiguous, as Paul Hurley argues. Probably my claim is somewhere along this ambiguity issue. I'm happy to grant the consequentialist's compelling idea is a clear and attractive in the abstract. My claim is that the idea loses its luster if we drop action as production. If there is more to acts than outcomes, there is something else for wrongness to turn on, something that can make an act wrong even when its results do not. Okay. And this is what I was saying to DeMarshall earlier. This is the narrow conception of like, look, this metaphysical position is something that most consequentialists need, and so this is kind of the problem. If you have action as production, you're constraining what counts as the right way of viewing the world, which actions count. Then you're going to be building in a sort of metaphysical restriction on your consequentialism, and that won't be consequentialism based. So, all right, but what else could an action be? Here's one answer: a response to the situation. Some acts, keeping promises, punishing transgressions, respecting rights, seem to be essentially backwards looking. They aren't just a means to an end, but a reaction to what is already settled: a promise, a wrong, a right. What an agent is doing is sensitive to what they are responding to. This seems to be the part of the intuitive notion of killing. In Footbridge, pushing the man counts as killing rather than letting die. Roughly because he was not under any threat until you got there, the threat was not part of the situation. If you don't push, by contrast, this counts as letting the 5 die, because the trolley's threat to them was already part of the situation. You simply didn't interfere. I have no idea about this. Like, I don't have this intuition, so it's like, yes, I understand what's going on, but my first reaction is just complete blankness. I know what the author's saying here, but like I don't share this distinction. This is the letting die versus the committing. It's an ancient idea, goes back to the Greeks. I mean, this is Oedipus Rex, I believe. The classic example. It's like they don't kill the baby that has the terrible prophecy about it, but they let him die. They put him out on a field and he somehow miraculously escapes, and somehow that's better. So this is a very classic idea. I understand the idea. Do I have any sort of like internal understanding of this? Not quite. So, but like I understand that people make this distinction. I'm not 100% what it counts as. So like, why should the backwards facing, doesn't this get ourselves back into the perspectivizing or perspective based theory again, relativizing to the moment, because this is a response. This is a relativistic statement. It's a response to the situation, so it's relative to the time. So aren't we just back to the relativism? Not sure. But okay, let's just tying it back to what was said earlier. This is a relativistic theory now. Okay, with this distinction in place, we can draw a parallel cut between two kinds of reasons for action. The consequentialist exclusively believes in the telic reasons based in outcomes. Reasons like this would result in 5 deaths. So this is the forward-looking. What's telos in English? I'm blanking. But anyway. The deontologist, meanwhile, also believes in the responsive reasons that spring from the situations, reasons like they have a right or I made a promise. So this is looking at some other theory. This is saying the consequentialist is always looking forward to the forward outcomes. The what is it? Telos is blanking on all of these things. But like, yeah, if you can look back, and so you can look at the different perspectives, what the outcomes are versus what the sort of like the state of the world is, like they had rights or I made a promise, then that's different, because you're looking as opposed to forward, you're looking backwards as opposed to forward in some sense. Clearly, the compelling idea doesn't compel if there are responsive reasons for action. An agent always has most tailored reasons to produce the best outcome, but that would nevertheless be wrong if there were a decisive response against reason, something like I promise not to do it, or they have a right that I not do it. A responsive reason could make it wrong to make things go best. Yeah, but this seems like back to the relativism, but sure. So how could the consequentialists rule out these reasons? How could we know that, despite the appearance of counterexamples, all reasons must be tailored? This is where action as production is essential. If action is entirely aimed at producing outcomes, then nothing besides an outcome could be even a candidate, I'd switch these words, even be a candidate for reasons for action. Responsive reasons, along with any other non-tailored reasons, are non-starters. They're reasons of the wrong kind. But if we give up action as production, we are opening our minds to the possibility of non-tailored reasons for action, and the compelling idea will no longer be compelling. Yeah, and so this is what I meant before, and this is the whole point, and I like this author for the sort of very straightforward argumentation at this point, because this is a nice line, and you can see they liked it because they emphasized it. They used the italic font to show that, because if you start limiting the reasons for action, then it's no longer going to be consequentialist, because you've got other reasons for doing this at the metaphysical level. But then once you futz with your metaphysics, you can't have metaphysical metaphysically compelling understanding of consequentialism, basically. So okay, someone might. Yeah, our conception of action determines. Question. Do consequentialists build their system to judge the actions on past when it happened, or to guide for future attempt? That is, it gets harder and harder to figure out sometimes. Like a lot of times they only say, look, you can't actually judge a action at the time. You have to actually wait and see what it is. So it's like, do you judge actions on the past or to guide future attempts? The idea is that you are trying to guide, but sometimes you can't actually know. So they get very sophisticated with like, all right, people were trying to do the best, but like they still may do bad, and then it's a bad action, and maybe you can blame the person at that point for what they did, even though they were trying their best. But yeah, so it's like a lot of times they're going to say, if you don't know what the outcome is, you can't judge the action. I mean, it's like, yeah, you're trying to bring about the best possible outcome, as was said a few pages earlier. But you have to be careful, because the consequentialists, they know this isn't actually an issue. It's like, how do you actually know what the best is? And so they don't want to just say, look, this is a guide for future action, because it's very hard to know what the future is. But they know that, and they take that into account. But it's the same thing for every other ethical theory. You don't always know what the good is, the deontological thing is. They're all sort of guide. You can think of them as guides for action, but that doesn't always mean that your understanding of it is going to perfectly align with like the right. So, all right. Our conception of action determines what things are of the right kind to be reasons for action, and consequentialism compels only if there is exactly one right kind of reason for action, tailored reasons. So yeah, again, I just want to highlight that this is like the right kind of reasons is a metaphysical thanks to Marshall. The right kind of reasons is a like metaphysical claim on like what is a reason, like the metaphysics of the right kind of reasons. And then the consequentialism acts, because it says there is only one right kind of reasons, the forward-looking, what is the consequences. But if you start making other claims at that level, then it looks like you're weakening your consequentialism. So, all right. Someone might object to this line of argument. Why should a view of action, of what action is, put any constraint on the kinds of things that can be reasons for action? But there is nothing unusual about the link between a thing's nature and its norms. Yeah, see, here we're getting to like norm talk. Norm talk is always so difficult. So yeah, consider the examples of norms for attitudes. It is a familiar thought that certain attitudes like belief and resentment are not by nature a way of producing states of affairs. Belief is essentially a matter of fitting one's mind to the truth, and resentment is by nature a response to a felt wronging. Given this tailored reasons for these attitudes are of the wrong kind, they just aren't relevant. To illustrate, suppose a despot offers me a fortune to believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5, or to resent you for the lovely present you just gave me. It doesn't follow that I should believe an obvious falsehood or resent a good deed. At most, as Parfit would say, the despot's bribe means that I should cause myself to have these attitudes, for example, by hypnosis. Yeah, but like, again, this is like familiar thought, intuition stuff that drives me crazy. So I apologize if I get angry. But yeah, there is something, the point the author is trying to make here is, look, we do make classifications for the right kind of idea, the right kind of reasons at different times. So there's nothing unusual about saying, look, there are right kinds of reasons for different things. So if you were worried that like there is no right kind of reason for consequentialism, well, it's not an unusual idea in general, and now I'm sure they're going to go on to support this claim also. Okay, yep, so and this is what they're going to do. So like I said, this author here has a very good sense of how arguments progress, and I quite like it because it makes it easy for me to explain it, really. But like they set up the issue here with the nice use of italicization, the emphasis, and then they say, well, here's is this even the sort of thing that this sort of comment that pertains? And they say, look, even if you don't think, if you are worried about this, it's a normal sort of thing, and then they're going to specify why there are classifications for kinds of reasons applies in this one case. So it's like a general, they made a claim, they asked a question, they gave a general justification, and then they're going to give a specific. Thank you, DeMarshall. Well, a lot of times the quality of my ability to review depends on the structure of what's going on in the paper. So sometimes I'm saying stuff, but like it's not going to be easy to explain, even if it is completely clear. That doesn't make it easily explainable. This one happens to be organized in a way that does make it easily explainable. Okay, continuing. In a domain where tailored reasons aren't supreme, we aren't compelled towards consequentialism. Consider these underwhelming spins on a familiar claim. Epistemic idea. It is permissible to adopt a belief if doing so would make things go best. Emotive idea. It is always permissible to feel resentment if doing so would make things go best. Okay. Suddenly, the idea that producing the goods must be right does not seem irresistible. If a certain attitude isn't just a matter of production, we aren't compelled to think that holding the attitude must be permissible whenever optimific. My point is simply that the same goes for action. I mean, alright, I was saying I like the author's writing. What the heck is the word optimific? I've never seen that before. I wonder if they actually use that word in the literature, or did the author just go a little overboard with the terminology, or making stuff up. Optimific. I bet it's something, and I apologize, but I've never seen that term before. I mean, must be permissible whenever... I mean, you could just go back to the classic deontology. I mean, consequentialism, when everything is the greatest possible good outcome. But no, optimific. Okay. Yeah, and so this is the point. The point is, of course, once you get at the level of the metaphysical level, yeah, once you get to the metaphysical level and you start saying, well, you can do stuff at this metaphysical level where you're doing beliefs, can matter to what is the outcome, and same, or how you feel matters to the outcome, then of course consequentialism loses its bite because there's something at the same level of the ethics that give you alternatives. Okay. Now, not everyone will be so skeptical of the epistemic and emotive ideas. Some may even find them compelling, insisting that we should believe and resent in whatever ways produce the goods. Okay, yeah, resent is from here. I'm should believe and resent in whatever ways produce the goods. This view is worth taking seriously, but I suspect that many consequentializers would share my skepticism, and that they are more compelled by the idea that one may always promote the good when the topic is permissible actions rather than permissible attitudes. Yeah, because this is moving into the attitude area. So this is the fittingness of reasons or the attitudes. Do you have to have the right attitude also, or is it just outcome? And if it's the right attitude, then you're not completely consequentialist because you're talking about having the right attitudes. Okay. These consequentializers will have special trouble resisting my premise that the compelling idea gets its aura from action as production. If the compelling idea is more plausible for action than for belief and resentment, why is that? Presumably, there must be some underlying difference in nature between action and these attitudes. But what could it be if not that action aims at production, whereas belief fits the truth and resentment responds to offenses? That wraps up my arguments for premise 1. The compelling idea depends on action as production. If some acts essentially fit the world as is, rather than trying to change it, then it makes perfect sense why optimistic changes could be wrong. Unless action is aimed exclusively at production, we shouldn't be compelled to think that producing the goods must be permissible, since there may be other considerations, like responding to rights, that are of the right kind to make a moral difference. If there can be non-talic actions, the compelling idea may turn out to be no more compelling for action than for belief and other attitudes. Okay, so, this is fine, I guess. It's just a sort of a recap of how they feel about how the author is like arguing for this. Yeah, I mean, I have like minor gripes because I think about this a little bit differently, but like that's cool. Okay, so if there's any questions, like this is like basically saying, look, once you get out of once you start looking at like other ways to look at the problem. I do fear, I just want to break this up one more time, this is sort of making it look, you're relativizing to the situation. Here you're relativizing to the epistemic situation, here you're relativizing to how you feel, the emotive situation, like being resented, believing or resentment as knowledge-based or how you feel-based, the emotions. So that is also a problem, or a question I have, is that what makes those more just as fundamental as your ethical theories? Are we then just relativizing to whatever arbitrary stuff we want to? But I see this as people generally don't think of ethics and epistemic stuff like knowledge and morals as so, like, they see them sort of on par. And so if they're on par, then they could sort of, if what the author is doing here is bringing them together and says, look, if they're on par, then you've got maybe other reasons for not just looking at the consequences. There could be epistemic things that get in the way. And perhaps the consequentialist would just bite the bullet and say, no, these are wrong. Like they just say, yeah, it's always permissible to do this stuff. Even though, okay, I'm getting this confused again. But like, yeah, the idea is permissible to feel resentment if doing so would make things go best. It's like, yeah, you could do that, but in that case, then you're also adding in this sort of emotive idea at the same level as the consequentialism. And then if it's at the same level of the consequentialism, then you've got other things going on there, and you can't have that. Consequentialism seems somehow to be, it has to stand alone. And that's the thing. So, all right. So, moving on. Why consequentialism undercuts, or why consequentializing undercuts. Okay, consequentialism is only compelling given action as production. Now I'll argue for, if killing is worse than letting die, then action as production is false. The claim is that the consequentializer who takes killing to be worse than letting die is recapturing intuitions but betraying consequentialism. Intuitions. But where exactly is the betrayal? Why can't consequentializers embrace action as production? Consequentialists come in so many stripes and dots, hedonistic and pluralistic, agent relative and agent neutral, that we are granting that all of these varieties can gel with action as production, so long as they don't consequentialize. What makes a consequentializer in particular unable to think of acts in terms of outcomes? The answer is that the consequentializers are drawing a moral distinction that can't be traced to any differences in outcomes. There is nothing about the act of killing that can make it worse than letting die, given action as production, so long as the narrow outcomes are the same. So again, this is the narrow view, because the outcomes are the same, but the intuition here is that these two things can't mix. In some sense, you can't narrow the stuff you can't narrow your notion of consequentialism when just based on your intuitions, because that would just be an arbitrary sort of thing that isn't consequential based. Okay, let me lay out my argument more carefully. Premise 1 is the principle about value. Resultants. If killing is worse than letting die, then something about the killing must make it worse. I am talking as usual just about the case of killing 1 to save 5 versus letting 1 die to save 5. This premise should be uncontroversial. Everyone agrees that moral properties are based in other properties. They are resultant. In Ross's phrase, pain, for example, is worse than pleasure because of a difference in how they feel. But what difference could make killing worse than letting die? Given action as production, the only place to look is within the broad outcomes. That leaves 2 possibilities. Only 2 options. If action as production is true, then only 2 things could make killing worse than letting die: a difference in narrow outcomes or a difference in the act themselves. But as the consequentializer them... Hey, what's up? That's Sinful. I'm sleep deprived. Let's go. I'm here. Yeah, let me tell you something about philosophy when you're tired. Don't rush philosophy, or when you're tired, I can guarantee you're going to have bad philosophy. But feel free to listen along. But I'm like, wow, I'm clever when I'm doing this stuff. And then I look at what I was writing the next day. I'm like, I was not clever. That was not clever. But yeah, hopefully a little bit of good fun. But as the consequentializers themselves seem to assume, same narrow outcome. Yeah, and if you have any questions, let me know. What we're talking about here is consequentialism, and if you start saying that certain acts are bad in themselves, like murder, then you're sort of arbitrarily narrowing, this is the narrow outcome, what counts in consequentialism. And the author here is arguing that in doing that, you're sort of betraying your consequentialism. So, killing and letting die have the same narrow outcome. Why else introduce the concept of broad outcomes? But if the narrow outcomes are the same, then there's nothing to make the acts themselves any different, so there can't be any difference at the level of broad outcomes either, and we'll defend this in a moment. Narrow principle. Given action as production, if 2 acts have the same narrow outcome, then they are intrinsically the same. Thus, the consequentializing undercuts action as production. If killing is worse than letting die, there has to be something about killing besides its outcomes that make it so. And so there must be more to killing than it's aiming at an outcome. I know of 2 objections to this argument. The first targets the narrow principle. Look, you're ignoring the importance of switching to the concept of broad outcomes. Don't forget, just as the act of running produces the outcome that one runs, killing produces killings, and the lettings die produce lettings die. Surely the consequentializer can use this fact to single out killings as worse while staying true to action as production. But this is a mistake. Unless there is already a difference between killing and letting die, you can't show that 2 acts are different by pointing out that one produces a killing whereas the other produces a letting die. The difference won't make a difference. Well, you could argue that somehow killing and letting die are somehow societal, I think I said earlier, are somehow different in society. You'd have to also make the claim that there is no other greater difference between them, say in terms of society. And you can do that because you can just say, look, no one's going to see you push the person, or if they just fell on their own. But yeah, so there is already some sort of notion built in that nothing else matters when you, in one of these trolley problems. It only depends on your act. And so maybe there's some little thing there that you could push on. I don't know. But you're set. The general understanding is that in a setup with a trolley problem and you're pushing a large man to stop the trolley, there is no greater thing that will happen. You won't feel bad afterwards. No one's going to watch you do it and create a stir in the media or something. All of those things don't matter. So it in some sense, if you were using the trolley problem, everyone has to agree that that happens. So in that case, yeah, the difference won't make a difference. There might be some little spot to push, though. I wouldn't be surprised if someone had. To illustrate, imagine an old-school consequentialist who accepts action as production but rejects any metaphysical killing, letting die distinction, or they think the difference is merely verbal or conceptual. On their view, killing and letting die have the same broad outcomes because they have the same narrow outcome, and the acts are themselves the same. Of course, if we do think these acts are different, even when they have the same narrow outcome, then we must also believe that they have different broad outcomes. But the difference in acts would have to be prior due to some other source. Suppose, for example, that we accept an expressive conception of action on which killing differs from letting die in virtue of what the act expresses. Killing says to the victim that they lack high moral status. What? I don't know what that means. I guess Shapiro does. On this view, killing and letting die have different broad outcomes. They produce different acts. But that is not and cannot be the reason why they are different acts. The broad outcomes are downstream of a more fundamental difference in expressive content. Without that more basic difference, nothing would be there to make the broad outcomes different, and the metaphysical distinction between killing and letting die would collapse. The same goes for responsive view of action. Acts that differ in how they respond to the situation, for example, revenge versus mere harm, will have different broad outcomes, even if the narrow outcomes are the same, but only because there's something other than the outcomes that makes the difference. Yeah, so I guess they're just saying, look, you have to, if you're trying to build, this is building in, like, some sort of other ideas about killing and letting die. But if you're trying to build in, like, more ideas, like, about killing and letting die, if you build that in, it says, but then you're not a consequentialist to begin with, and that difference won't make a difference because you have to look at the consequences, not what you've built into it. And so it's like if your intentions matter, kind of like down here, you've built in an intention, and so it's a different act, but then again, what exactly is that difference? It's like, well, the outcome is the same, your intention doesn't really matter there. Okay. What if we are overlooking some hidden difference in the broad outcome, something special about killing? Could this be an opening for the consequentializer to bring in the distinction between killing and letting die? That is the idea behind the final objection. There is always going to be some metaphysical difference between killing and letting die. When I kill, typically at a mim, I have to move my body, as when I push the man off the bridge. When I let die, typically I don't have to lift a finger, as when I watch icily as the man is pushed by the wind. Won't killing and letting die always be distinguished by some such physical difference? This is a retreat from the consequentializer's recipe, which takes for granted that she can help herself to the opponent's distinctions. Now we have a consequentializer trying to retrieve the killing-letting die distinction within the limits of action as production. Does it work? I don't think so, but to explain why, I need to clarify the objection. Yeah, so it's like, well, you're still doing something. If you realize you could have pushed the person and then you choose not to act, that is definitely something different than if you realize the situation, you could kill the person and then you go and you kill the person to save the other five people. And I mean, and at least in that difference is that you get to push the person versus you don't get to push the person, and you make that that's a physical difference. Okay. One way to hear the objection is as follows. Killing and letting die have the same narrow outcome, but killing is intrinsically different because it involves some further actions, like the moving of my hands towards the big man as I topple him over the footbridge. There is no such movement involved if I let the wind do the toppling. But this cannot be quite right. If killing involves moving my hand, then the narrow outcome must include something that is missing from the outcome of letting die. My hand's moving. This is not something that I do. What I do is move my hand, transitive verb, and as a result my hand moves, intransitive. This latter fact is part of the narrow outcome. Indeed, it seems that for any pair of killing and letting die, we can point to some such movement that is in the narrow outcome of killing, but not of letting die. Okay. This is slicing things real thin, and I'm not sure these sorts of arguments work, but what the author is doing here is like they're saying, look, all right, let me finish. You're going to explain more clearly. Now we can state the above objection more clearly. The question is, since the killing has extra movements in its narrow outcome, why can't the consequentializers use this fact to recover the killing-letting die distinction within the action as production framework? My answer is that killings do not essentially have these extra movements. They do in the actual world, but that is only because killing is not actually, for human beings, a basic action, something that we do but not by doing something else. Only supervillains have the power to kill with their mind. Humans must kill by pulling triggers and pushing men off bridges. Letting die, even for us, does not require any such means. And so these means contingently allow for action as production to distinguish killings from lettings die. If we were to find a case where killing and letting die really do have the exact same narrow outcome, we will need some thought experiments. Suppose that a supervillain has the power to kill a certain person, basically disappearing them at will without lifting a finger. Unless he kills the one, 5 others will die by being disappeared. He saves them by killing 1. Now, contrast this with the case where all 6 are to be disappeared, and the villain can use his power to either save the 5 or save the 1. He saves the 5, letting the 1 die. These actions have the same narrow outcome. Given action as production, there can be no difference between them. But deontologists will say that there is a difference, a metaphysical difference giving rise to a moral one. And so we have a case where we see the limits of the view that makes consequentialism so compelling. Okay, so basically, this is sort of like, look, if you take out the pushing of the hand, like where you have to push someone, if you just ignore that, then it falls back to the intentions. Like, why do we actually have to do a physical world thing? What does the physical world have to do to the moral position of the people involved? You don't actually need to be doing something physical. Just say it happens based on your moral stance. Like, you've got a brain moral reader, and it reads your moral stance, and so you don't actually have to push the person. You just have to basically have the consequentialist perspective that pushing the large man onto the tracks and diverting the trolley is the moral thing to do. And so in that case, you would actually, that having that perspective is the action as production. Then there's no difference between them. But of course, other people would say there's still, of course, a difference, because the deontologist would say, look, killing one person is like, it's always bad to like kill people. And so just because there's a physical act, that doesn't get you out of the moral, that doesn't make a moral distinction in some sense. The fact that you had to, there's a physical, what's it called? Blanking on the word here. But like, there's just, it's not arbitrary. It's like, it happens to be a consequence of history that certain things we do can only be done physically, but that doesn't actually give rise to any moral distinction. So, if there's no moral distinction there between like our physical movements, because of course, say someone doesn't have an arm, then could they not push someone with their hand off the bridge, and they're therefore have less chance of making a moral mistake because they don't have any hands, and so therefore they couldn't push a large man with their hand off a footbridge, and so therefore they are somehow less likely to make this sort of one act of pushing someone off a bridge. Of course not. They could like push the large man some other way, but like that whole point here is that, of course, you don't have to lift a finger. Well, if you don't have a finger, but like a supervillain just has to think about it, and the moral case still hold, even if there is no physical act. Okay, so it's a funny argument. Okay, conclusion. We began with the classic problem for consequentialism, which is that killing is intuitively wrong, even in some cases where it has the best outcome, such as a footbridge. The standard line is that this problem is shallow. We can consequentialize insisting that the act of killing is surprisingly bad and recovering the wrongness of murder by trolley. I have argued that the problem runs deeper. By consequentializing, we are in a position of we are positing a moral difference between acts that can't be reduced to prior difference in outcome. Anyone comfortable with this cannot claim to be compelled to see the outcomes as the only reasons of the right kind for action. The consequentializer should be open, for example, to the possibility of responsive reasons, like the fact that the person on the bridge has a right not to be thrown off, or expressive reasons, like the fact that killing is disrespectful. I mean, I'm not exactly sure where their distinction is here. Like, All right, I'll get back. Let me finish up, and I'll get back to the what I was going to say. If these aren't reasons of the right kind, then the consequentializer must say why, which is no easy take if they cannot appeal to action as production. How could the consequentializers respond? One option would be to find something other than the act itself to put the badness of killing in, something like the violation of rights. To say this, however, is to admit that the consequentializing recipe isn't a sure thing. It also raises a dilemma. If violation of rights just refers to the violating act, we are back to stuffing badness in action. But if violation is supposed to signify that rights have intrinsic moral oomph, so that they are unfit to disregard, we are positing responsive reasons to respect people's rights and giving up the consequentialist game. Another option is to tweak the consequentializer's view of action. Excuse me. Again, there is a dilemmatic tight squeeze. Action as production is too restrictive for the consequentializers, but if we loosen the view to allow for responsive actions, consequentialism will not seem so compelling. Responsive reasons will not seem like reasons of the wrong kind, mutatis mutandis, for expressive reasons, etc. And so we are left with a stark choice. We can have the compelling idea of consequentialism, or we can have the intuitive judgments of common sense deontology, but not both. In the end, consequentialism is at its most compelling when it lets us get away with murder. Okay, nice paper. Again, the writing here is a little bit more, a little more interesting than a lot of these papers. Like this cutesy last line. Consequentialism is at its most compelling when it lets us get away with murder, but this also betrays sort of the author's hand here. Is in how do you slice things to begin with. When it lets us get away with murder, I think the consequentialists wouldn't want to even, like the hardcore old school consequentialists wouldn't want to call it murder anymore. Hey CG, hey, well, if you got into work today, I am very, very, very impressed with you. Because I was showing people the view outside my window, and I think we're probably at like 2 feet right here. But yeah, oh, you work from home, okay. Yeah, there's no working today. Like, it's just, if anything is open in the entire tri-state, it's like, that's nuts. Yeah, so, if you have any questions, otherwise, but let me know, but otherwise, I have a good time working. Yeah. So what was I saying? Oh yeah, this is an argument against a certain sort of consequentialism, the consequentializing, and where they allow you to look at the act, or where it allows you to not look at the act and only at the consequences, as if the act doesn't in some sense count as existent in that world, only the consequences. But at the metaphysical level, it's hard to square that with only looking at the consequences, because the act itself somehow should matter, because it is also a consequence of doing it itself. So yeah, this is a nice paper. I think because it comes at it from a metaphysical perspective, and then if you're going to look at consequences, how do you only look at the consequences and not the act itself, and not judge the act itself, when a lot of times we want to judge the act itself, in the case of like pushing someone off a footbridge to their death, even if it goes on to save lots of people. So you need the right kind of reasons. Oh yeah, so this is nice. Let me just reread this one line here, because seemed like the important line, and the author said it. But if we give up action as production, we are opening our minds to the possibility of non-tailored reasons for action, non-consequential reasons for action, and the compelling idea will no longer be compelling. And this is the whole point right here, this opening our minds deally. You're not opening your minds technically, although this is a nice sentence. What you're doing is you're opening your metaphysics to other reasons, as they said, epistemic or emotive reasons. And once you've got competing reasons for action, you no longer are compelled by the moral reasons that are given by consequentialism. So if you're no longer compelled only, because if you have more than one reason for doing something, you're not going to be compelled. And what this does is it opens the door to relativism. As they were saying, this responsiveness is a relativistic thing. And where was the relativistic argument? It basically turns it into a relativistic, like you're only looking at case by case issues in the consequentialism, which takes away the teeth from the position, because there is no looking at consequences, because every time you have to look at consequences, well, the consequences are local to that one. This is how I'm taking. The consequences are local to that situation there, but that doesn't. Yeah, it's relativized to times and moments, and then it's not giving you an ethics, because it's like, well, if everything's relative to those times and moments, then no big deal. You have to you have to take everything in that one case, and you don't have a overarching ethical stance anymore about what should be done or how to judge things. Everything is judged in the moment, and it's like, all right, well, if everything's judged in the moment, that's fine, but you're not looking at the sort of overarching consequential view. Yeah. So I like this paper. It shows that there's a serious problem for a good swath of consequentialist theories at the metaphysical level of where are you going to judge. If you're looking at results, where are you getting the results from? If you only look at the consequences, aren't there things, can't you just keep going up the metaphysical ladder and saying, look, there's other things at the same level? No matter where you're looking at consequences, aren't there other things at the metaphysical ladder that matter at that point? Is it the knowledge you know about it? Is it the emotive state, like how you feel about it? Can't you always find something at the metaphysical, on the same sort of metaphysically on par? And once you can do that, then you've given yourself a way out of any given ethical consequence, basic conclusion. An ethical conclusion is only could be resisted by saying, well, I'm going to look at this from a different perspective, the epistemic perspective or the emotive perspective. Then all of a sudden you're no longer ethically compelled to do what it says, because you've got other ways of going about it. And then if you're only looking at consequences, you can't do that. Okay, so this is a nice paper on sort of like the meta ethics. I don't know what this actually is called. Let me go take a look real quick at the it doesn't. All right, I'm not sure what this is the Metaphysics of Ethics in some sense. So this is a fun paper. You don't always see things that just sort of. This is why this is going all the way at all of consequential, a huge swath of consequentialist argumentation. So it's all right. That's why this was a well published paper. Yeah, if anyone has any comments, that's cool. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be done with this paper for now. I might, play some Minesweeper or something for a bit. Could come back, but I do need a small break after reading a paper of this length. I'm at an hour and a half right now. So, cool. Yeah, I guess that would be it for this paper, unless anyone else has a question. But thank you for watching. You can give me suggestions. Oh, yeah. You can join my Discord. And if you have suggestions or anything else for the philosophy stream, let me know there. If you want, you can always message, or you can whisper me here on Twitch too. But yeah, I just set that up. CJ is, I think, the queen of trying to remember to get herself, her socials out there. I'm always very impressed with her diligence. She's always on that grind. She does a very good job. You're like, yes, check the socials out. And I am terrible at it. Okay, so that's it for now, and thank you for watching, and I will be back soon, but the stream will continue.